On the split infinitive world of English Grammar Program 3, we'll start off by explaining verbals, which are verb forms that function as some other type of speech in a sentence. Next, we'll introduce you to 4 parts of speech: adverbs, which describe verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs; prepositions, which show relationships between other words; conjunctions, which provide transitions within sentences; and interjections, which are words that express emotion or surprise.
Pop quiz time! What is the function of an adverb? Hang around and we'll tell you the answer at the end of the program.
You can get it. All right.
Let's start off our program with a big review about nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and verbs. After that, we'll tackle verbals, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. Now, here's the review.
First, nouns. A noun can be a person, place, thing, concept, or idea. There are 4 types of nouns: common nouns like gecko, desk, and pencil; proper nouns like Mrs. Kowalski, Washington, D.C., and Abraham Lincoln; compound nouns like bicycle trail, 32, and classroom; and collective nouns like family, team, and audience.
Pronouns. A pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun. It refers to the noun. We learned about the personal pronouns, I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. The possessive pronouns, my, your, his, her, our, and their. And the demonstrative pronouns, this, that, these, and those.
So, what have we learned about adjectives? We know adjectives add zip and zing to our hard-working nouns and pronouns. Adjectives describe nouns and pronouns. Articles are tiny adjectives like a, an, and the. And finally, we can use our demonstrative pronouns, this, that, these, and those.
Okay, we've learned a lot about verbs. First, we learned that a verb expresses action or describes a state of being. A verb changes form to reflect who's using the verb: I, you, he, she, we, or they, what the noun's number is, be it singular or plural, and what tense is being used.
We learned several different tenses. The first were the simple tenses, the past, present, and future. They express what happened, what is happening, and what will happen.
The next tenses we learned were the perfect tenses: the past perfect, the present perfect, and the future perfect. These tenses express an action that has a beginning and an end. They're formed by combining the present tense of the helping verb to have and the perfect form of the verb.
Next, we learned about the progressive tenses: the past progressive, the present progressive, and the future progressive. These guys indicate continuing action. The progressive tenses are formed by adding ing to the end of the main verb and using the proper form of the helping verb to be.
The last set was the perfect progressive tenses: the past perfect progressive, the present perfect progressive, and the future perfect progressive. These tenses combine the features of both the perfect and the progressive tenses. That means the perfect progressive tenses are formed by adding ing to the end of the main verb and using the correct forms of both of the helping verbs to have and to be.
And don't forget conditional statements. A conditional statement is used to express uncertainty or speculation. It's often used with the word if. And don't forget to use the correct form of to be. Were, not was. That's the verbs, folks.
Section C, verbals.
So we hope you now have a handle on how verbs work in sentences and the many ways they can be changed to show a different tense. But no matter what, a verb is a verb is a verb, right? Well, actually, no.
One funky thing about verbs is you can change them into other parts of speech.
We know that it's part of a verb's nature to show action or a state of being, but with a little tweaking, we can take that spirit of action and shape it into a noun or an adjective. When we do this to a verb, we get what is called a verbal. A verbal is a verb form that functions like another part of speech in a sentence. There are three main types: gerunds, infinitives, and participles.
The gerund.
When we add ing to a verb and use it as a noun, we call it a gerund. Gerunds let us use verbs as if they were nouns. Remember that a noun is a person, place, thing, or concept. Now, take a look at this sentence.
Chirping is an important skill for crickets. Now, let's figure out which words in the sentence are verbs. Well, we know is a verb, and chirping looks like a verb too. But if you look at the role it's playing in the sentence, it's actually functioning more like a noun, like it's the concept of chirping, not the action of chirping. No cricket is actually chirping in the sentence. Instead, we're talking about chirping as a skill, which makes it a noun.
Notice how all we had to do was add ing to the end of the word to make it a gerund, changing chirp into chirping.
The infinitive.
Another form of the verb we can use as a noun or adjective is the infinitive. The infinitive form of a verb is the one that has the word to in front of it. To live, to learn, to coagulate, to be, or not to be. Infinitives one and all.
Suppose we were to write, to succeed in creating the perfect tuna casserole takes lots and lots of practice. Our verb in this case is takes. To succeed is actually a noun in this sentence because we're talking about the concept of succeeding. Now let's use an infinitive phrase as an adjective.
My great-aunt Matilda has a license to kill. Here we have an infinitive phrase, to kill, modifying the word license. What kind of license is it? A license to kill. Now let's just say you have a license to change the form of your verb to an infinitive. Use it with caution.
Present participles and past participles.
We can also change verbs into adjectives by either adding ing to the end or using the perfect form of the verb, which usually means adding either ed or en. Remember that an adjective is a word that describes a noun or a pronoun. When we form one of these, we call it a participle. The ing form is called a present participle, and the perfect form is called a past participle.
So we can take the verb fly and add ing, which gives us flying. Now we have the makings for a present participle, and we can use it in a sentence like, the flying monkeys are actually quite friendly. Notice how the word flying in this sentence is being used to describe the noun monkeys. This would make it an adjective, not a verb. Hey, looks like we have a prime example of a present participle.
To make a past participle, we use the perfect form of the verb, which usually means adding an ed, unless we're dealing with an irregular verb, when we would usually add something like en or something else weird.
Now, let's try to make a past participle using the verb exhaust. Since it's a regular verb, we can just add the ed ending, which gives us exhausted, and we're ready to use it in a sentence.
The exhausted clown passed out at the end of his performance, but nobody helped him because they thought he was kidding. Here, exhausted is an adjective describing the word clown, which makes it a past participle.
If you're trying to make a past participle using an irregular verb, just use whatever ending you would use for the perfect tense. Take the word fall. We know you wouldn't say falled, so we would use the perfect form fallen. Now we could say, my dog loves to go for walks on newly fallen snow. Again, we've made a past participle out of the word fall since we're using fallen to describe snow. Are you getting the hang of it yet?
Even though we just got down and dirty talking about participles, you probably use participles a lot more than you realize. The downside is, the more we tend to use a construction like this, the more ways there are for us to screw it up. Here are a couple things to look out for when you use participles.
Remember that a participle is a verb that we tinker with and then use like an adjective, and an adjective modifies a noun. Sometimes, however, when we're really into our writing, we may leave out the noun but keep the participle in there. Suppose we say,
Hoping for a miracle, the townspeople prayed that the emu crop would be bountiful this year. Everything's okay so far. In this sentence, hoping is a present participle describing the noun, the townspeople. Now, suppose you weren't paying too much attention and wrote, hoping for a miracle, the emu crop would be bountiful this year. Aha! We know hoping is a participle, but what exactly is it describing? We know the emus certainly aren't looking forward to the harvest. We've used a participle, but left out the noun it's supposed to be modifying. This type of mistake is called a dangling participle, and it's a pet peeve of many teachers, so always be on the lookout and never leave your participle dangling. It's also embarrassing.
Another common mistake is to leave the D off a past participle. What if we say,
Hakeem was supposed to know how to operate the Zamboni. We're really using the verb suppose to describe Hakeem, which would make it a participle. But we know that to make a past participle, we need to use the perfect form of the word, which here would be supposed. So, the correct way to say this sentence would be, Hakeem was supposed to know how to operate the Zamboni.
In this last section, we talked about how you can twist and turn around a verb and make it into something else like a noun or an adjective. We call these new words verbals. There are three main types of verbals: gerunds, infinitives, and participles.
Gerunds are the first type of verbal. Gerunds are when we slap an ing onto the end of a verb and use it as a noun. For instance, in the sentence, skiing is my favorite sport. Skiing is a gerund.
Infinitives are the second type of verbal. Infinitives are when we put the word to in front of a verb and use the whole thing as a noun or an adjective. In the sentence, to learn a foreign language is my next goal, to learn is an infinitive used as a noun. In the sentence, I have a license to drive is an infinitive used as an adjective.
Participles are the third type of verbal. There are present participles and past participles. A present participle is when you add ing to a verb and use it as an adjective. In the phrase, flying monkeys, flying is a present participle. A past participle is when you take the perfect form of a verb and use it as an adjective. In the phrase, the exhausted clown, exhausted is a past participle.
Part 4, the best of the rest. Adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections.
Great! Now we know quite a bit about how verbs work, so we can use verbs
Carefully.
wisely,
energetically,
like totally.
Hey, what did you do with my verbs?
Section A, adverbs.
We already know we can use adjectives to describe nouns and pronouns. But guess what? We can use words to describe verbs too. We call these verb-enhancing words adverbs. So adverbs describe verbs, but they can also describe adjectives and other adverbs. We'll show you how they work. If the word answers the question how often, when, or to what extent, you're probably dealing with an adverb.
The easiest way to see if you're dealing with an adverb is to see if the word answers the question how often, when, or to what extent. And the easiest way to build yourself an adverb is to add an ly to the end of an adjective.
Here's an example. As a talker, Simon might be slow, but we would say he talks slowly. See how first slow describes Simon, which makes it an adjective, while slowly answers the question, how does Simon talk, which makes it an adverb. All we had to do to change slow into an adverb was add an ly.
We can also write, the color of these mushrooms is slightly different. Here we have formed the adverb slightly by adding an ly to the word slight. Then we use it to describe the adjective different. Now, let's use an adverb to modify another adverb.
Suppose we write, this mushroom is very definitely poisonous. Now we have an adjective poisonous modified by an adverb definitely. But notice how we also have the word very, which is describing definitely. This makes very an adverb since it's being used to describe another adverb.
But wait, it doesn't end with an ly. Did you notice that very is being used as an adverb even though it doesn't end in ly? Yep, you guessed it, it's an exception.